Welcome to ResponseABLE Parenting, the podcast that shows you how to parent in alignment to your emotions, needs, and goals versus your programming, bad advice, and let's face it, outdated strategies that just don't work. You'll get in the trenches support on nervous system and emotional regulation, critical mindset shifts, stronger communication strategies, and more. In this podcast, you'll gain transformational tools that take you from reacting to every frustration to responding with clarity, regulation, and finally setting the example you desire for your kids. I'm Becky Jennings, your new parenting coach, and this is the ResponseABLE Parenting Podcast. Let's get into it. Hello. It's really nice to be back in this seat. I've kind of been in this weird haze for a little over a month now. My dad passed away in end of July, and it just is like, that's like a really weird and kind of just an interesting time in your adult parenting life when your own parent passes away. It's just the permanence of it, like that we'll never be able to have a conversation again. Like it's just kind of wild. So, anyways, this past weekend was my dad's funeral, and we had like a remembrance ceremony of him. My brother had done a really cool art show. If you don't know my dad's story or things that I've shared about him over the years, if this is your first time listening, thank you for listening. What a podcast episode to jump into. But my dad was a photojournalist for 20 years, and then he became a minister, and he was a minister for 20 something years. So lived very two different realities or two different worlds. And my brother, he has gone through all of my dad's old photography negatives, and he put on an art show. And basically, it was this incredible show that my dad was supposed to be at the opening, but he passed away like the week before the opening. And so the opening of the gallery sort of became this like memorial, like this big celebration of my dad. So I flew back for that. And of course was, all in the feels in that moment. But it was kind of like the second I landed back in Martha's Vineyard with the boys for the summer, for the rest of the summer, it was just kind of like go, 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 go. And so I didn't really have like my morning hat on for a while. It was like task, just, I don't want to say I was distracting myself, but it almost felt like I didn't have enough time and space to really sit down and mourn and think and reflect until I was given the opportunity to write a eulogy for him for his funeral, which was just a couple days ago. That was probably the hardest thing I've ever written. And I write for a living, right? This is what I do. I write workshops, I write courses, I write blog posts, I write podcasts, like I write. And this was the hardest thing I've ever written. But how I laid it out was kind of like how my dad laid out his sermons when he was a pastor. And I framed it all as lessons that I've learned from my dad. And excuse me. These lessons are how I really show up in the world, how I take care of myself, how I take care of others, and really, truly, how I want to show up as a parent. And these words of wisdom and these lessons weren't just lessons that he verbally taught me. A lot of them were through observation of who he was and how he handled himself and how he moved through the world with this sturdiness. And so I want to share the lessons that I learned from my dad. And so I want to play the clip of the eulogy that I wrote. So here is the eulogy. You will hear me definitely sobbing and crying quite a bit. But I think from this, there were some lessons that I'm even like recalling in the moment now as I parent. Like if my child says something like my son said that he was really terrible at answering questions. Like I'm just so bad at it. And immediately I was like, oh, this was exactly one of those lessons that my dad taught me. And so I was like, do you remember when I said in Papa's eulogy that like, if a problem is super big, we just have to break it down into pieces. And then my son was like, oh, okay, yeah. So I'm pulling these lessons in and I'm keeping them top of mind as I move through parenting. But I will stop my intro here and thank you for being a part of this process for me. And a lot of how I show up for you is through how my dad showed up for me. So enjoy and thank you for being here. I'm not really sure how to do this without crying, so just try my best. So we can all agree that the preteen and teenage years are fairly clunky and awkward, but dating is hard enough, but being a pastor's daughter took it to a whole new level. Movies like Footloose and A Walk to Remember and shows like Seventh Heaven did not do me any favors. Everyone had their idea of what a pastor's daughter was like. She was either a total goody-goody or a complete rebel. But here's what nobody understood, is those stereotypes would probably have been true for me if I had the stereotypical pastor as a father. And I don't have to convince anyone here that he was anything but a stereotype. So I could share stories all day that would make us laugh or cringe, like when he made my brother Bill and I pose as Mary and Joseph for the Christmas bulletin. That was a little awkward. Or the time he was testing out recumbent bikes only to slam on the brakes too hard and go rolling across the street right after his doctor cleared him to ease into biking. That ended with the classic, don't tell your mother. So I'm sorry. But today, instead of stories, I'm going to share some reflections. My dad always liked the theme, so this is the theme of this. When we lose somebody we love, everything seems to stop. All routines and normalcy are replaced with silence that's both deafening and oddly comforting. It's a necessary silence, though, giving us a chance to block out all distractions and to reflect on what really matters and to find those pieces of that person still within us today. So in that silence, I've been reflecting a lot on my dad's wisdom. And I'd like to share 8 lessons. I had more, but I took it down to 8. And these are lessons that shaped how I treat myself, shaped how I care for others, and shaped how I hope to raise my boys with our superior boys. Okay, here we go. Lesson 1, don't wait for the right time to live your life. This past Thanksgiving, my dad and I were chatting on my back deck. And for a moment, he was present, but I could tell he was really frustrated. And through tears, he said, I can't believe I'm going out like this. I had so much more I wanted to do. Coming from a man who had accomplished so much in his life, I was both shocked, but I understood. Because we spend so much of our lives just doing that we forget to live. We put off our dreams for another day that we're not guaranteed. So live the life of your dreams every day, even just a little bit. Whatever that looks like, just don't wait for the perfect time. Okay, that was 1. Whew. Lesson 2, your body doesn't define you, but your message does. I have never met somebody who actually loses count when they're trying to count the amount of broken bones they've had in their lives. From the top of his head down to his toes, he's pretty much broken everything in between. And yet he would stand up in front of all of you, no matter what shape his body was in. Whether he was in a wheelchair or had a sling, or he was 20 extra pounds or the fittest he'd ever been, none of that ever mattered to him. His body was just a vehicle for his voice, and he never dulled that voice for the fear of how he looked. It never defined his abilities. If one part of his body was broken, he'd just figure it out with the other. He never let it slow him down. My son Hunter was obsessed with the bump he had on his cheek. He always pointed it out in awe every single time, and he was shocked that it was still there. That imperfection didn't define him. It became part of his charm. We spend so much of our time hiding our own imperfections instead of sharing our wisdom and connecting with others. My dad showed me that those imperfections are often what makes us unforgettable. Lesson 3, you are not your mistakes. There was a high bar set by my dad in the Tinney household. While he might have agreed on paper that perfection wasn't possible, striving for perfection was. I remember he drew a circle on the tree when I became pitcher of my softball team, and I had to throw 100 strikes before I could come inside. A 4.8 or 4.0 was always expected. Sitting in the front row of church was non-negotiable, unless you had chickenpox. And there was no other ground beside the moral high ground. But even with those enormous expectations of goodness and 1% shy of perfection, he never held our mistakes over our heads. If anything, it was good sermon material for him. In all seriousness, one thing my dad did better than anyone I've ever met in my life is forgive. He would never hold your mistakes against you. Just a few days after his assault, he forgave his attackers and only asked them to just learn from their mistake. He knew mistakes weren't a reflection of who you were, but an invitation to grow stronger and choose better next time. And just like muscle tears are the only way to grow stronger, he knew that with each repair came an opportunity to up-level in your relationship. To him, mistakes were always an invitation to choose a higher standard to live by. Lesson 4, halfway there. Be both a launching pad and a safety net for your children. My dad broke many cycles that my brother and I benefit from. And one of those was in the way he taught his lessons. Never with fists or harsh language, but always with the goal to prepare us, with the hearts and the minds necessary to stand sturdy in ourselves. One could agree that we were a bit sheltered from reality as a pastor's family. I had quite the wake-up call in college. But even with the steep learning curve outside the pastoral bubble, I had lessons from my dad to always guide me through. Problems come in pieces. The enormity of some problems can be paralyzing, so start with a small step and break it down piece by piece. Trust your gut. Even if your mind is racing and the pressure is heavy, your gut is never wrong. If they don't treat you like I do, they are not good enough for you. We don't have to agree with each other to be kind to each other. And you always have a safe place to land. No matter how much trouble you think you'll be in, we can always figure this out together. Lesson 5. There is magic in the mundane. Part of my dad's legacy that he left behind is you can always find something precious in the ordinary. That's something my dad did often. He would capture a reflection in a raindrop. He'd notice all the shades of red in a hummingbird's chest feathers. Or he would comment on how rays of sunshine come through tree branches. Fingers of God was what he called them. I always cried at this part when I was practicing. I find myself doing the same throughout my life. Marveling at a sunset, feeling the overwhelming love when my kid's hand find their way into mine, and the exhausted satisfaction of completing a huge project that came from one of my tiny ideas. Life is full of wonder and magic, and yet we miss it all the time in our rush. My dad always invited us to slow down and not only witness the magic that was all around us, but also the magic that was inside of us. I promise we are almost done. Lesson 6. You can only control yourself, but don't ever stop pushing boundaries. My dad was a rebel, even in his stole. Whether he was a photojournalist climbing up the ladder behind a fireman trying to get the perfect shot, or he was standing up against the conference rules and performing a same-sex marriage at the risk of losing his own church. He pushed against every boundary, especially if there was injustice. But it was the way in which he did it that made him so effective. He never forced anyone to change. He only took responsibility for himself. He stood so hard in his convictions, and he always remained open to other perspectives. He never tried to force his agenda, but it was his quiet courage and his relentless certainty that continued to break boundaries and forge new paths. Lesson 7, you get more of what you want by listening. My mom and I fought a lot throughout my childhood, and my dad took it upon himself to personally be our designated mediator. every single day. At times, these family talks felt like torture. But I see now that his insistence on us using our I statements or reflecting back what the other person said was teaching me the fundamentals of listening in order to get more of what you want. I can tell you that I did not learn that lesson until I became a parent. I spent the majority of those family talks pleading my case and actively not listening. But now I know that the only way through is to listen, to find the common ground, and to ultimately find a solution to the same recurring problem. It's only when we feel heard that we can finally lower our armor and work together. Lesson 8. Don't stress too much about the small things. My dad's mother was an expert in worrying about the small things, and with a kid like my dad, I kind of understand it now. As a parent, I realize how the small things can be so consuming, and it pulls focus away from what truly matters. As I was walking out of his room for the very last time, having said my very final goodbye to him, he looked up at me and said, "Your dad's still here. Stop stressing so much about the small things." Little did he know that this 16-hour trip to get to him was filled with small things I couldn't stop stressing over. But his words will be a life raft that I hold on to throughout the rest of my life without him. My dad's life is the proof that legacies aren't built in loud, flashy moments. Rather, they're built in the ways that you show up every single day. How you treat people, how you stand by your convictions, how you listen, how you forgive, and how you slow down to notice the magic in a sunbeam. He was never a stereotype, never easily defined, and never afraid to walk his own path. I'm sure he's already making waves up in heaven. I feel lucky to have been the daughter of such a great man. He is here in us always. And as I'm reminded of his very last words, your dad is still here. Thank you. It's 2025 and there is more parenting advice than ever before. Yet we're still confused, stuck, and as a result fall back into yelling, threatening, and punishing in moments that don't require such harsh reactions. Parenting has evolved, and it's time your parenting strategies do too. Welcome to REWIRE with ResponseABLE Parenting. This is where you get the support you're looking for so you can make fast, positive, and long-term change in your household. Inside this complete parenting system, you'll get a done-for-you roadmap that teaches you how to understand why you get so triggered, how to support both yourself and your child in the heat of the moment so you can react less and respond in a way that connects you versus creates more ruptures. You will quickly create a new nervous system baseline, allowing you to access more regulated and effective communication so that you can set and hold boundaries without meltdowns, reduce power struggle nightmares, and truly dial down the temperature that spikes every day. And if you're like me, you crave instant results and personalized feedback. Now you can join REWIRE Level Up and have 6 months of weekly coaching calls. In these calls, we work together on your specific challenges and we hyperspeed your rewiring process. This means you see faster changes in your home, which means relief sooner. This is your complete program to rewire your parenting brain so that your whole family can finally exhale. Join REWIRE today and start feeling relief as early as tonight. Thank you for listening to the ResponseABLE Parenting Podcast. If you like what you heard, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. If you know someone who would benefit from this podcast, I'd be honored if you'd share this episode with them. Until next time, know that you are enough, you are capable, you've made it through all of your hardest days, and we will keep growing on this parenting journey together. This podcast was produced by Kim Kelty and myself, Becky Jennings, and edited by the Kelty Method, Branding and Podcasting.